Hi, everybody. I wanted to go through the stuff for your final lab exam. This is encompassing a number of different systems, including the musculoskeletal system, as well as the nervous system with all of its additional structures. I wanted to review this first before I do chapters 15 and 16 because you're taking your lab exam a week before you are taking your last exam for lecture. Again, this PowerPoint is posted. It's called Final Lab Exam Structures, and you also have a Final Lab Exam Structure list posted as well on Canvas in the lab section. So make sure you are studying those. Every structure you need to know is on that lab exam list and should be iterated in this PowerPoint. We'll start with histology. You will be asked to look at different tissues and identify different structures. This lab exam is going to be a similar format to your previous one, where you might be asked questions with multiple choice answers, or you'll have a picture and you'll have to click and drag the labels to that picture. For histology, if we remember looking at different types of muscular tissue, we have skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. Okay, and we do need to be able to identify certain features of this muscle, which could be labeled during the lab exam. So here we see that this tissue, this is skeletal muscle, okay, it has multiple nuclei, okay? As you can see in this tissue, multiple nuclei is something that is specific to skeletal muscle. In addition, you see that this muscle looks kind of like an accordion, okay? You've got all these lines in here. These lines are called striations in the muscle tissue. We are going to see striations not just in skeletal muscle, but also in cardiac muscle. We do not see it in smooth muscle. So this is our skeletal muscle tissue marked by striations, okay, and multiple nuclei. Cardiac tissue looks a little bit different, okay? You can still see those striations, they are present, and we tend to have a singular nuclei present within an actual muscle fiber. What is characteristic of cardiac muscle, if you're having trouble distinguishing it from skeletal muscle, is the presence of these intercalated discs, which are kind of darker regions separating out individual muscle fibers. Intercalated discs are only found in cardiac muscle tissue. The last type of tissue is smooth muscle tissue. They make these spindle-looking fibers. There is a single centralized nucleus here, and as you can see in this tissue, there are no striations. For our other type of tissue, which is nervous tissue for histology, you will be expected to see a picture, like you see here of this microscope slide, of a motor neuron. And you should be able to identify different features in this motor neuron. This is the cell body, or the soma, and branching off of it, we see multiple dendrites. And then we have a singular large extension coming off of it, which we term the axon. And any of the cells kind of surrounding it, as we can see here, or we can kind of see their nuclei here, are called glial cells, neuroglia. Those will be the features that you will need to identify from our neuron tissue. That's just a bigger picture of it, showing each of those different terms that are listed in your structure list. Again, when you are looking at this tissue in the test, you are going to be given the microscope slide, not the cartoon rendition. All right, we're now going to go into muscles, okay? And you notice that it is a fairly, small list of certain muscles throughout the body, but you do need to know certain specific features, which are listed in your list. So make sure you're taking a look at that as you go through. We'll start with, you just have these overall pictures showing all the muscles in the body. This is just to help you orient yourself. We'll start in the head and neck. You have a total of 6 muscles listed that you need to know from the head and neck area listed on your guide. Occipitofrontalis being one of them. So we can see the frontal portion here. It's going to stretch all the way to the back of the head, to where we see the occipital portion. So this whole portion here is occipitofrontalis. Few others, we have orbicularis oculi and orbicularis oris. Okay, orbicularis oculi is this kind of orb circular shaped muscle around the eye, and orbicularis oris is that orb circular shaped muscle around the mouth. For the buccinator, okay, which allows you to purse your lips, we can see that right here. It's a little bit deeper. We can see it underneath the masseter, which is another muscle you need to know for chewing. And then the last set of muscles that you need to know are zygomaticus major and minor, okay? Zygomaticus major sits underneath zygomaticus minor, and these go over our cheekbone, also called our zygomatic bone. All right, and you can see them from multiple views here. There's the masseter, so as another view, and buccinator sitting underneath it. All right, we'll move into, I think we have a couple in the neck, but they're kind of interposed with the chest and all those, so we'll get to there. Let's see. Yep, from your list, you do have sternocleidomastoid, so this very large one, seat belt going across the neck. You have levator scapulae, which is kind of going on the back of the neck towards the scapula, which is why it has that name. We'll see another view of that soon. And I was trying to see if you have splenius capitis on your list. You do. So a couple in here. You have splenius capitis, which is on the back of the head, back of the neck. And you have temporalis as well on your list right here. If we want to look at it a little bit more deeply, okay, for the back of the neck, this is where splenius capitis is, really on the back of the neck. And then you can see levator scapulae is going up to the back of the neck, but it's going farther down to meet with the scapula. And we can see kind of the first portion of sternocleidomastoid before it goes across the front of the body. Right, if we want to take a look at some chest muscles, okay, you've got pec major, which is superficial, and if you remove that, pec minor is underneath. You can see we see superficial muscles on this side and deep on the other. So pec major goes over pec minor. We have serratus anterior, which is going to be on the front. Okay, we'll see the posterior on the back. And it has these kind of serrated looking edges for this muscle, which is why it's called serratus anterior. We can also see a few other features, okay? We can see parts of the abdominal wall as well. We can see our six-pack, rectus abdominis. We can see if we go towards the sides, we have external oblique. We remove part of that. We have internal oblique, and then we remove even more, and we have transverse abdominis. So these are layering in the torso. If we look even further, you can see a few other features, and we're starting to pull on some of these arm muscles, which we're going to see a little bit later, okay? But you can see a bit more close-up of those chest muscles. If we move to the back, okay, back of the torso, we can see trapezius, which is superficial. It actually covers this whole area, but we have cut it back, okay, so that we can see the two rhomboid muscles underneath. We have rhomboid minor and rhomboid major, major being larger than minor, and they are those deep back muscles. We can also see a really good picture here of some of our different ones surrounding the pectoral girdle. Levator scapulae, again, going up into the neck, but reaching the scapula. We have supraspinatus and infraspinatus, okay, around the spine of the scapula. And then we have our armpit muscles, teres minor, which is very deep. Okay, we can only see part of it sticking out, and teres major. In general, you're going to see the major muscle underneath the minor muscle, except this is not the case for the pecs. If we move into the lower back, we have latissimus dorsi, and we can see part of our deltoid here. If we look at the arm, we can see part of the deltoid on the front of the arm. We can see the two heads of biceps brachii. We can't really see much else, okay? We can start to see that brachialis muscle kind of underneath, the biceps brachii, and we can see the beginnings of brachioradialis before it goes all the way through the forearm. If we look at the back, we can see the triceps and see if we have to know. You don't have to know the individual heads, but the triceps do have 3 heads. One is deep, the medial head, but that'll be on the back of the arm. You can also see another view of some of those pectoral girdle muscles. If we move into the leg, okay, this is a lateral view. We can see gluteus maximus and gluteus medius. Gluteus medius is more towards the hip. You can see the iliotibial tract, okay, which is attached to a muscle called tensor fasciae latae, okay, before we get our IT band here. And we can see a few other features, but we're going to want to look at the front and back of the leg in order to see those muscles. And I'm going to pull up that on my list real quick to make sure we go through all the correct ones for the thigh as well as the front and back. So if we look at the front of the thigh, and I would definitely expect this cadaver image to be on your exam, okay, we can see that we have the quads, and the quads make a structure very similar to a hot dog, okay, if you remember me talking about this previously. So we can see we have rectus femoris, okay, which is our hot dog. On either side, we have muscles. On the lateral side, towards the outside of the body, we have vastus lateralis, and on the medial side, towards the inside of the body, we have vastus medialis. And we know underneath all of this, we have vastus intermedialis, but we cannot see that in this view. As far as other muscles we can see in this view, we can see sartorius, which is the seat belt across the thigh. We can see iliopsoas, okay, also called just the psoas muscle right here. It's very deep next to sartorius. We can see pectineus after that. And then we can see kind of towards the midline before we get to gracilis, we can see adductor longus. Again, for your list, you may not have to know every single one of these muscles specifically for the leg, but you should be looking at all the ones from the list. And all the ones I've just gone over for this view of the leg is on your list. For the back of the leg, we have the hamstrings, okay? And we do want to distinguish between the 2 different heads of biceps femoris, okay? Biceps femoris has a short head, which is kind of hidden right here, as you can see, and we'll see it hidden over here. And then we have the long head of biceps femoris. Next, we have semitendinosus, and then most internal, we have semimembranosus. So kind of follow those through. Definitely would expect the cadaver image as well. If we look at the front of the leg, for the lower leg, we have tibialis anterior, very large muscle on the front of the leg, on the tibia. We have all the way lateral fibularis longus. And then if we move to the back of the leg, because we're not doing that many on this lower leg, we have gastrocnemius, calf muscle, and underneath it we have soleus. We're going to move into the nervous system structures. Again, make sure you're taking a look at your list, okay, for all of the structures you need to know for muscle. For the CNS and PNS, we have different parts of the brain that you need to be able to recognize, okay, from a variety of views, okay. We have our different cerebral hemispheres, which we'll take a look at. Let's look at this side view first. We can see the different lobes, frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, temporal lobe. We can see cerebellum, and we can see the brainstem, pons, medulla oblongata, and deep to this would be the midbrain. We can see the central sulcus, okay, separating out the frontal and parietal lobes, and we can even see precentral gyrus and postcentral gyrus on either side of central sulcus. We can also see the lateral sulcus here, separating out the frontal and parietal lobes from our temporal lobe. And we can see the parieto-occipital sulcus, separating out the parietal lobe and the occipital lobe. All of these lobes together make up a structure we know as cerebrum. And we know that cerebrum has a variety of convolutions or ridges called gyri, and all of these minute depressions are called sulci. This is what this would look like with a cadaver brain, very same structures. You will also have to know a number of different structures, including the cranial nerves. The cranial nerves are not ID'd here specifically, so we're going to actually go through that together on another picture. All right, we have a kind of view of the brain here. We have a number of different internal structures for the brain that we'll take a look at. Mostly for diencephalon, you just need to know the thalamus and the hypothalamus, thalamus being here and hypothalamus being here. For cerebellum, you'll see arbor vitae, which means tree of life. That's this white matter here. And then the surrounding structure is the cortex of the cerebellum. Brainstem, we can actually see the midbrain now, midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata. And that is about it for most of the features until we start to actually look at some of the spaces in here. Again, this would be another view with the cadaver brain. For our ventricles, you do need to know those structures. We have our two lateral ventricles, left and right. We have interventricular foramen, the hole, allowing it to flow from the lateral ventricles to third ventricle. We have a canal here called cerebral aqueduct, allowing CSF to flow from third ventricle to fourth ventricle around the brainstem. Those are just some different views, right? We've got the two lateral ventricles, also called the lateral horns. We have interventricular foramen, we have third ventricle, cerebral aqueduct, fourth ventricle from these different views. We have precentral gyrus, which is in front of central sulcus. Don't worry about knowing the rest of this information here. We have postcentral gyrus going behind central sulcus on the parietal lobe. Don't worry about this extra information here. As far as the brainstem goes, you don't have to identify any specific structures on it, just the main three: midbrain up here, pons right here, and medulla oblongata here. You'll notice there are a number of cranial nerves, which we will see a different view for, so you can learn those as well. Again, these are just multiple views of the same thing. For cranial nerves, you will have to be able to identify them in a very similar picture to this brain right here. The cranial nerves are highlighted in yellow. There is a specific exercise that you can actually do to go through your cranial nerves. It's a little dance of sorts that I usually do. I can show you guys that real quick. Essentially, you're just kind of trying to follow your cranial nerves as best as you can through just doing these kind of hand motions. Let me see if I can get my camera to focus real quick. Let's see. I think you can see me, although that's super close. Okay. And you may be able to see me kind of in the picture. You may not. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing real quick so I can be on the main screen. Okay. So as you go through the cranial nerves, and you'll want to see kind of the picture. So let me see if it'll pop my head up in there with the thing. Yeah. So my head is in view. So as you go through the cranial nerves, you can see they're oriented a certain way, and they all kind of go throughout the midline of the brain into different sections. And a lot of them just kind of go around the brain stem once we start with cranial nerve 3. Okay. So what I usually do is, this is 1. Okay. We can see the 2 olfactory nerves. This is 2, right? They make that optic chiasm for cranial nerve 2. And then we start on the brain stem 3, 4, 5. And I just do my branches of 3 for 5 because it's our trigeminal nerve. We then go back to the middle. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then 12 is back in the center as we go through. So we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 back in the center. We're just doing motions to go around what we're doing. I'm gonna I'll continue with myself in view as we look through these pictures. All right, so cranial nerve 1, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then 12 is back in the center. So they kind of all just kind of go in and out. You just need to know when to stop and where to stop. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, back in the center, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 is kind of long, right? And then 12 back in the center. So kind of memorizing how they orient will help you when you're labeling them on the exam. We have a few other features, and I'll go ahead and turn my camera off so I'm not distracting. There we go. All right, we have a few other features, okay, that we can see as part of the nervous system, and that's where we get into the spinal cord. We have different parts of the spinal cord, okay? We have cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral regions, and the small coccygeal area. We have a kind of basic reflex. We would call this a somatic reflex that we can kind of see for our spinal cord, where we have essentially, and we'll see if we get like a good picture here. Yeah, here it is. Okay. You have a receptor, you have a sensory neuron, you have the control center, which is the spinal cord, you have a motor neuron, and then you have an effector. Those are kind of our main spots, okay, that we're going to actually see our reflex happen. We have a few different areas of the spinal cord. Remember, you have these posterior horns here, lateral horns, and anterior horns. And we know that when we're looking at this tissue, this is gray matter for the horns and white matter on the outside. I think we have a couple more features in here. There are a few things, these enlargements and then cona medullaris coming in here. So when we kind of take a look at this area, cona medullaris is kind of this big conglomerate in here where we start to have an enlargement here, okay, at the end of the spinal cord. Cauda equina, we know is going to be all these kind of horsehair looking things because cauda equina means horse tail. And we have a couple enlargements right at the bottom of the cervical region. We have a cervical enlargement and kind of at the bottom of the thoracic area, we have kind of an enlargement right before we get to the lumbar area called the lumbosacral enlargement. All right, we also have some special sense structures, which you notice for the eye and the ear on your list. Okay, we'll start with the ear. You have penna or auricle, you have external acoustic meatus, and you have the tympanic membrane, your eardrum for the outside external portion of the ear. You have malleus, incus, and stapes for the internal portion of the ear, and you have semicircular canals, vestibule, and cochlea for the innermost portion of the ear. You can kind of see these pictures of them up close. For the eye, we have a few features as well. Okay, you have your outer portion, which is cornea and sclera. Inner portion is choroid. We have the ciliary body here. We have our iris. And the internal portion, we have the retina. You do not have to know the layers of the retina, but you do have to know where the retina is. This is just a more up close kind of image. We can see the lens here, which has those suspensory ligaments as well as our ciliary body. We have our cornea, we have our iris, our pupil, we have vitreous humor in here, we have our optic nerve, we have sclera, choroid, and we have retina. And that is it. Just some basic features from those special sense organs, okay? And that is mostly it for the lab. It is a lot of different structures, so make sure you are studying those muscles well as those features of the nervous system. And feel free to email me if you have any questions. Thanks.